Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the 2026 Space Phenomena Observatory Center, or SPOC, report. We're going to break down the highly technical physics-based hypotheses behind Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, UAPs. We're completely stripping away the wild speculation here and looking strictly at what modern physics, aerospace engineering, and materials science actually have to say about these mysteries. Now, what's really fascinating about this report is how it frames the entire investigation. Rather than getting bogged down in endless conspiracy theories, this approach objectively applies cutting-edge theoretical physics to unexplained observations. We're asking a pure, hard engineering question. If these objects are real, what exact mechanics make them possible? So, here is our roadmap. We'll start with the impossible flight characteristics, then move on to warping spacetime and inertia. After that, quantum fields and metamaterials, followed by the higher dimensional hypothesis. And finally, we'll tackle the big one. Who exactly is piloting these crafts? All right, Section 1, the impossible flight characteristics. To really grasp this, we first have to establish the mystery by looking at baffling behaviors that completely defy conventional aerodynamics. See, the crucial point here is that these objects aren't just pushing against the air like a normal jet or rocket. Conventional aircraft rely on expelling mass or using aerodynamics to create lift, right? But the SPOC report outlines 10 observed characteristics that totally rewrite the rulebook. We're talking about anti-gravity-like lift with absolutely no visible rotors or wings. We're seeing instantaneous acceleration, and get this, seamless transmedium travel. That means these objects can literally drop from outer space, plunge through the atmosphere at hypersonic speeds without producing a sonic boom or even a heat signature, and then slip right into the ocean like it's nothing. Moving on to Section 2, warping space-time and inertia. Let's see how theoretical physics builds a framework to actually explain these seemingly impossible maneuvers. Because, let's be honest, just pushing air out the back of an engine clearly isn't going to cut it here. Luis Elizondo's space-time bubble concept is a great way to visualize this. The hypothesis here is that the craft isn't actually flying through space, but rather manipulating the space-time around it. By contracting the space in front of the vehicle and expanding the space behind it, the craft basically surfs a wave of spacetime. Inside this little bubble, the effects of gravity, aerodynamics, and water resistance drop to almost zero. And boom, that perfectly explains the total lack of a sonic boom and the ability to travel seamlessly through both air and water. But how do they actually manipulate spacetime? Well, we need to understand a concept called vacuum polarization. This is a quantum phenomenon where you take an incredibly intense electromagnetic field and use it to literally alter the quantum state of seemingly empty space. It basically causes a massive redistribution of virtual particles in the vacuum. Now, I know it sounds straight out of science fiction, but this is an incredibly active area of advanced physics right now. So if you can polarize the vacuum and manipulate these extreme high-frequency fields, you might just achieve inertial mass reduction. This is an idea heavily linked to the patents of aerospace engineer Salvatore Pais. If we can artificially reduce inertial mass, well, suddenly inertia is no longer an absolute law of physics. Instead, it becomes a controllable engineering parameter. This is the magic key. If a craft has zero inertia, it can accelerate instantly and make right-angle turns at hypersonic speeds without the g-forces completely crushing the craft or whatever happens to be inside it. Which brings us to Section 3, quantum fields and metamaterials. Now that we've looked at the wild propulsion theories, what kind of energy and physical materials could possibly withstand this kind of extreme spacetime manipulation? Well, modern physics tells us that the vacuum of space isn't actually empty. Quantum field theory states that even in a perfect vacuum, there are quantum fluctuations and virtual particles just constantly popping in and out of existence. We call this zero-point energy. And some researchers hypothesize that a highly advanced UAP might actually tap into this omnipresent background energy to power its massive electromagnetic systems. Now, you hear people throw around terms like dark matter or dark energy all the time when talking about unexplained phenomena. But if you look at the physics, dark matter and dark energy remain completely mysterious from an engineering standpoint. Vacuum energy, on the other hand, actually has real roots in observable phenomena, like the Casimir effect. So theoretically, it's a far more viable candidate for an actual energy source. But having unlimited energy is really only half the battle. To survive the absolutely extreme environments of ultra-high magnetic fields, immense heat, and literal space-time distortion, the SPOC report suggests these crafts would have to be built from metamaterials. These are artificially engineered at the microscopic level to possess electromagnetic or mechanical properties that just simply do not exist in naturally occurring materials on Earth. And this is exactly why your standard aviation metals or ceramics just won't work here. A UAP would require highly engineered intermetallic compounds formed into multi-layer composite structures. Furthermore, the report suggests these crafts might use a high-energy plasma envelope. This plasma could interact with terahertz waves to control radar signatures and even bend light completely around the craft, giving it literal optical camouflage. Let's jump to Section 4, the higher dimensional hypothesis. Because what about the crafts that don't just camouflage themselves, but literally seem to vanish from radar and sight in an instant? To explain these sudden appearances, spatial jumps, and completely discontinuous flight paths, the SPOC report explores the higher dimensional hypothesis. This suggests that these crafts might not actually be confined to our three-dimensional space at all. They might be utilizing higher dimensional geometry or even wormholes. And these are concepts that heavily intersect with ongoing real-world quantum gravity research at places like CERN. But hey, we absolutely need to stay grounded here. The existence of a theoretical concept in physics does not mean someone has actually built an engine out of it. The SPOC report explicitly notes that as of May 2026, there is zero public evidence that space-time distortion propulsion or vacuum energy extraction has been practically realized on Earth. These are robust scientific thought experiments, meant to provide a framework for the unknown, not established technological facts. All right, our final section, Section 5. Who pilots these crafts? We've explored the physics, the energy, and the materials, which leads us to the ultimate question of this whole explainer. Who or what is behind the wheel? Let's think critically for just a second here. If a craft is powered by ultra-high magnetic fields, fusion reactors, and is literally warping the fabric of spacetime, could a biological entity, like a human or even a biological extraterrestrial, actually survive inside it? The harsh reality? The internal environment of a UAP would be an absolute biological nightmare. It'd be the universe's worst roller coaster. According to ICNRP guidelines, just moving through strong, static magnetic fields causes severe dizziness and neurological issues. Add in tissue heating from high-frequency fields, lethal radiation from fusion or plasma, and the completely unknown biological effects of being inside a space-time distortion field. Yeah, in its natural state, any Earth-like biology would be instantly destroyed. So, for a biological pilot to survive that, the craft would require a deeply nested, multi-layer shielded, safe cabin. It would have to sit at the absolute dead center of the propulsion field to cancel out inertia entirely. On top of that, it would need artificial gravity, massive radiation shielding, and total thermal isolation. From an engineering perspective, that is an incredibly tall order. And that brings us to a really crucial comparison. When you weigh the massive engineering requirements of keeping a fragile biological organism alive versus simply building a machine, the winner is incredibly obvious. Biological beings need oxygen, they need food, sleep, a pressurized cabin. An AI probe? It requires none of that. It can withstand extreme G-forces, endure insanely high radiation, and operate totally autonomously for massive lengths of time. Which leads to the SPOC report's most grounded deduction yet. The incredibly agile, small UAPs frequently observed in our skies, like the famous Tic Tacs and metallic orbs, are highly unlikely to be piloted by biological beings. Instead, it's far more scientifically consistent to view them as highly advanced autonomous AI probes. They're likely just data-gathering machines, completely unburdened by the frailties of biology. I want to leave you with this final thought from the SPOC team because it beautifully sums up the scientific method. They say, we do not accept everything, we do not reject everything, we continue to observe. The science tells us these machines are physically possible. So the ultimate question isn't whether they can exist. It's whose AI probes are already swimming in our oceans and flying in our skies. Keep questioning, and thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.